Let me open our service with these words from our hymnal. They're from Annie Dillard. I'm reading from 420 in case you want to see where I'm reading, but these are from Annie Dillard. We are here to abet creation and to witness to it, to notice each other's beautiful face and complex nature, so that creation need not play to an empty house. Joy, we'll light our chalice.
Let me know if you can hear me. Can you hear me? It was interesting to look up some quotes on caves. Everywhere you hang your hat is home. Home is the bright cave under your hat, by Lance Morrow. And we can't go without hearing from Joseph Campbell. The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. And then to lighten up a little bit, a joke. Why do caves make great comedians? They have rock solid timing.
Thank you, Joy. Join with me, please. We light
this chalice for the light of truth. We light this chalice for the warmth of love. We light this chalice for the energy of action. And we light this chalice for the harmony of peace.
Bob and I are going to play, and I'm going to play, and he's going to sing a song from the Beatles. Here Comes the Sun, because the sermon this morning is about being in the cave and coming out and seeing the sun. So, here we go. You ready?
Here comes the sun, doo-doo-doo-doo. Here comes the sun, and I say, it's all right. Little darling, it's been a long, lonely winter. Little darling, it feels like years since it's been here. Here comes the sun, here comes the sun, and I say, it's all right. Little darling, the smiles returning to their faces. Little darling, it seems like years since it's been here. Here comes the sun, doo-doo-doo. Here comes the sun, and I say, it's all right. Sun, 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 here it comes. Sun, 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 here it comes. Little darling, I feel that ice is slowly melting. Little darling, it seems like years since it's been clear. Here comes the sun, doo-doo-doo. Here comes the sun, and I say, it's all right. It's all right.
major theologian from our Unitarian side of Unitarian Universalism. But now I want to, before we read this, I want to we might take this reading for granted, is what I'm trying to get at. Do you have that slide? Can you show that slide? Has anybody ever been to Berlin, Germany? Berlin? This is a statue in Berlin of Giordano Bruno. And if you notice, it's upside down. And he has no clothes on. His hands are tied behind his back. You can't see it, but his mouth is gagged. And he is a martyr to the free mind. He was crucified, he was executed by the Catholic Church on Ash Wednesday in 1600 because he had a free mind and he was not afraid to express it. And he paid the ultimate price for having a free mind. So when you read this reading, you need to realize the pain and suffering that the martyrs of Unitarian Universalism have gone through so we can have a free mind and express it. He opposed the Catholic doctrine of the geocentricity of the earth. He had a vision of an infinite universe with worlds beyond and with life on other planets. And he was not afraid to express this to the Catholic hierarchy. So, in a moment we're going to be talking about coming out of a cave. Well, you could say as a metaphor, he came out of the cave of the Catholic Church dogma. And he went back in and tried to enlighten them, and this is the price he paid for that. So when you read this reading, don't take for granted that you're here because of just nothing. You're here because people like him and others were executed as heretics by the Roman Catholic Church. Heretic, by the way, comes from the Greek word to choose. And so being a heretic means that you have a choice. So the church is saying we have a geocentric universe. Well, you're saying, well, I can give you the choice to believe in an infinite universe and a heliocentric universe. Well, the church didn't want people to have that choice. So they gagged him. He was not able to talk. So in other words, they did something to his vocal cords. They either cut them out or they did something so he couldn't speak. Now, he's a product of the Inquisition, and believe it or not, the Inquisition, the Spanish Inquisition only ended in 1834. That's not that long ago. That's not long ago. And Channing wrote this Free Mind in 1842. Channing wrote what we're going to read here in Free Mind. So think about when you read this, if you were reading this before 1834 and you were reading it out loud, you might end up like Bruno. So don't take this for granted as we read it, okay? So the free mind. I call that mind free which masters the senses and which recognizes its own reality and greatness.
Which passes life, not in asking what shall eat or drink, but in hungering, thirsting, and seeking after righteousness.
I call that mind free which jealously guards its intellectual rights and powers, which does not content itself with a passive or hereditary faith.
Which opens itself to light whensoever it may come, which receives new truth as an angel from heaven.
I call that mind free which is not passively framed by outward circumstances and is not the creature of accidental impulse,
which discovers everywhere the radiant signatures of the infinite spirit, and in him finds help to its own spiritual enlargement.
I call that mind free, which protects itself against the usurpations of society, which does not cower to human opinion,
which refuses to be the slave or tool of the many or of the few, and guards its empire over itself as nobler than the empire of the world.
I call that mind free, which resists the bondage of habit, which does not mechanically copy the past nor live on its own virtues.
But which listens to new and higher and rejoices for itself forth in fresh and higher traditions.
I call that mind free, which sets no bounds to its love, which whenever they are seen delights in virtue and sympathizes with suffering.
Which recognizes in all human beings the image of God and the rights of God's children, and offers itself up to willingly sacrifice the cause of humankind.
I call that mind free, which has cast off all fear, that of wrongdoing, in which no menace or peril can enthrall.
Which is calm in the midst of tumults and possesses itself over all else.
Thank you. I forgot to tell you though, even though Bruno was in Italy, he was an Italian, and he was tried and found guilty in an inquisition in Italy. This statue is in Germany, and it was only erected in 2008. But I wish we could have a statue like this in Washington, D.C. I mean, of all places for this to be would be Germany, as a message to the people in Germany that we're not going to have our minds controlled by politicians or popes or whatever. Anyway, I just thought you might like to know that. Now, I guess you can get rid of him. You all want to watch? Yeah, that's good. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Becky. You may recall several Sundays ago, I reminded you all that Western culture is a product of two great rivers that have fed Western culture and Western psyche for thousands of years. One of those great rivers comes from the Hellenistic world, Greek thought, which has given us philosophy and science. The other river feeding Western culture is from the Hebraic side, the Bible, Judaism and Christianity. And as you know, I don't need to tell you, those two streams have never merged. And there's been constant conflict in our culture in the past and even today between science and religion. And when people say religion is science and science is religion, be careful what they tell you, because the two don't always merge unless they've given a certain definition. But many ways they haven't merged. It's complex. One of the ways that they haven't merged has to do with the simple idea of knowledge. Most of you know the biblical tradition of where knowledge came from, right? When Adam and Eve, I always say Eve because she did it, not Adam, disobeyed God's order not to eat from the tree of knowledge in the garden. And Eve disobeyed because she was tempted and reached out, took the fruit, and if you know the story, when she bit into it, her eyes were open and she saw the light. but that was considered in that mythology to be a no-no. Knowledge was not something humans should have. And it resulted in the curse of humankind and the fall of humankind. So that whole mythology questions the idea that humans know and should not have known, should have lived eternally in the Garden of Eden. I like to think of it like two chipmunks running around in a cage, just happy, just not knowing, you know. And I used to tell my students, you know, that how would you like to have a roommate who didn't know the difference between good and evil? Well, that was Adam and Eve before they ate the fruit, you know. They didn't know the difference between good and evil. They were pretty much like, I guess we think of animals. They didn't know, they didn't have knowledge. And of course the question, you know, that those theologians were addressing about this whole issue of knowledge is, what will humans do when they get knowledge? What will they do with it? Will they create or will they destroy? So it's a risky business, you know. And of course that mythology goes on to tell how they took their knowledge and they tried to build a tower up to heaven, the Tower of Babel. So it's not a really good thing that they got this knowledge. And so from that stream that has fed Western culture, there's that myth that knowledge is a very risky thing, not always good. In fact, more than likely not good. Well, that's not what we get from the Hellenistic side, from the Greeks. For them, it was a totally opposite story. Knowledge for them was a gift from the gods, from the divine. And they believed so much in the power of knowledge that they created a god, Apollo, who was a god of reason. And so they praised knowledge. They felt like knowledge was something divine. They felt like knowledge was something that humans could have and do good with it. And so you get two totally different ideas of knowledge that have flowed into our psyches and into our culture. So really, from the get-go, we have been a schizophrenic culture. We have. We've had this conflict. We have it today. Constant conflict between creationism, evolution, so forth and so on. So that's where that is. Now, we're going to look at Plato's myth of the cave. How many people know that story, the myth of the cave, the allegory of the cave? Okay, we're going to look at that in just a moment, but I want to tell you something a little bit about it before we look at it. It's, of course, Greek, and it was created by the Greek philosopher Plato, who is probably the greatest philosopher in Western culture. And Derek was reminding me before the service that the philosopher Whitehead said all of Western culture is a footnote to Plato. So Plato really set the stage for the scientific part of our culture, the technological, scientific, philosophical part of our culture. He set the stage for that through this myth. We're going to look at it in a moment. But before we look at that myth, I want to say a few things about it that led up to it. And the first thing is that by the time we get to Plato, 500 BCE, the Greek philosophers have pretty much already laid the foundations for what we have, for what we call science. They've already laid those foundations for what we call science. And they had pretty much departed their ways from mythology, from magic, from superstition, and all of that. And they had pretty much determined that they were going to pursue this notion of science, philosophy, and knowledge. And what they understood, what they began to understood, is there are rational explanations for everything. We don't have to believe in miracles. We don't have to believe in spiritual causality. There are rational explanations behind everything. And the only way to get there is to go behind it. You've got to go behind what you see and figure out how it got where it got, through cause and effect. So they pretty much established that we can know, and it just requires using our minds and our brains. Now, there's another dialogue where Socrates says, I'm going to prove that everything that we discover about the world is already in our minds. All we need to do is unlock it and find it. So he pulls this little slave boy aside and he says, I'm going to teach this little boy geometry by asking him all the right questions. And so he asked this little boy all the right questions, and the little boy is spouting out geometry. And so Socrates is proving the fact that everything we need to know is locked in our minds. And it would just help if we could free them, And you call that kind of knowledge recollection. You just need to recognize what's already there. And they had discovered geometry. And Plato was, of course, absolutely enamored with geometry. And again, Derek reminded me because he said he taught this myth of the cave about 500 times, and he's going to correct me if I get it wrong. But he said Plato had over the academy, let no one ignorant of geometry enter here. Now, we would have never landed a person on the moon if we didn't know geometry. Geometry is what got those people on the moon and got them back home, geometry. So, in Plato's notion, geometry, it's always been there. And we're not inventing it, we're discovering it. And what yet do we have to discover if we just open our minds? So, now all that Greek, Platonic, philosophy, science, bam, came to an end when Constantine declared Christianity the national religion of the Roman Empire. No more of that stuff. So science had to yield to theology and the Catholic Church. And it wasn't reawoken until the Renaissance, but we won't go there. So Plato's myth of prisoners in the cave. Now, I'm going to risk it and try to demonstrate that. And I've got a volunteer who's going to come up here and represent a prisoner in the cave for us, and that would be Dawn. Do you have a blank screen?
Did you notice that I've been volunteered?
Do you have a blank screen on there? If you don't, that's fine. No, that's good. All right. All right. There's a cave. Plato says there's a cave. And there's 3 or 4 prisoners who've been in this cave since they were born. They've never been out of the cave. Now, this is not literal, okay? This is a figure, this is a metaphor. They've been trapped in there since childhood. They are trapped in such a way, chained to a wall in such a way that only they can see this wall. And between them, behind them, and the light they see, the sunlight comes through, and there's a path right here. And people walk up and down the path like this. And sometimes they carry things on their heads like this. And that's what he sees. Maybe I'll slant it that way. And that's what he sees. They might carry flower pots, they might carry baskets, but they're carrying objects. And all he ever sees are these different shapes passing back and forth. And so that's the extent of his knowledge. He sees shadows on the wall, illusions, delusions. But then one of the prisoners breaks free. Come on out, Don. Go out here. Walk right there. He gets behind the object. He gets behind it. He says, oh, all those different objects are the same object, which is
The triangle.
triangle. Thank you. Give him a hand. But now that's not the end of the story, because the prisoner escapes. He finds the true object. He goes back in to enlighten the prisoners inside, and guess what they do? They reject him. And if he's fortunate, he won't end up like Bruno. So gets out there, enlightened, finds the truth, tries to bring it back to the people, and they persecute him. Does that sound familiar? That sounds like one of the biblical characters we know, for example, Jesus or Buddha. So Plato's, that sets the foundation for science. You can't depend on what you see with your senses, what appears to you. Nothing is ever what it appears to be. You know, that's just surface living. You're a prisoner of the cave. You're just looking at shadows and illusions. You've got to get behind it to see what it is. Now, behind is a spatial metaphor. You've got to get yourself behind it. Another metaphor, you have to understand it. You have to stand under it. Or you have to get to the bottom of it to see what it is, to find out what it is. All that is scientific ways of thinking. Nothing is ever what it appears to be. Okay, let's talk about the prisoners for a moment. Those of us who would rather stay in the cave and not come out. Because it's comfortable in there. It's secure in there. We know what we need to know. Why upset that? Why come out and find out a truth that may be painful? Why come out and find out truth that may shake the foundations of the world that I've established? Or why come out with a truth that may be counter to some dogma that has lasted for thousands of years, i.e. the Trinity? Just stay in your cave. You know, there's a saying, ignorance is bliss. Ignorance is the illusion of bliss. So we can stay in the cave of ignorance, like many people are choosing to do. Not know. Remember the little story I told you of the kid who asked the person on the street, what are the two most important things in the world today? And he said, I don't know and I don't care. That's what we have in this country. I don't know. I don't want to know. There's people who do not know what January the 6th is. And they don't want to know what January the 6th is. We can stay in the cave of lies. Stay in the cave of lies. And that's another thing that we're experiencing in this country. Is lie after lie after lie from our leaders. We can say, okay, just accept the lie. Accept the conspiracy theory. Don't come out of that cave. Don't ask questions. Don't think. Just stay in the cave. Nietzsche once said, faith means not wanting to know what's true. You know, that's one way to look at faith. And I think in his time, his experience, that's what he was dealing with when the church was coming over to the side of Nazism. For him, faith was just not wanting to know what's true. But then you have Luther, who said faith is taking a risk. Faith means taking a risk. And that is coming out from your comfort zone and your cave and coming out into the light. And, when the prisoner came out of the light, according to Plato's myth, he was blinded by the light. And he had to adjust. He had to go through a process of adjusting to the light. Sometimes we go through a process of adjusting to the truth. And it may hurt. Truth hurts sometimes. I always love the story of the king's clothing. Everybody's afraid to tell the king he's naked. So, he's naked. And some little boy takes the risk and says, I'm going to tell him he's naked. And he does, I love one of the readings in our hymnal, Cherish Your Doubts. Cherish Your Doubts. And I don't know how you were raised and what church you were raised in, but I can guarantee you that doubt is not the product of Satan, the devil, causing you to doubt. If you've ever learned that in your church, just forget it. Because doubt can be your best friend. And doubt can cause you to dig deeper. And doubt can cause you to look behind everything you believe and ask, why do I believe this? Why do I do this? I look around me and I think so many of us do what we do out of superstition. We just do it because we're superstitious. That if we don't do it, something bad will happen. Go to church, read your Bible, say your prayers. Superstition. Because what will happen to me if I don't do it? That's not faith. You can't say yes to something if you can't say no to it. You're not free to say yes to something if you're not free to say no to it. And you are here because you choose to be here. You're not here because you're afraid if I don't go here, something bad will happen to me. I've had people say that to me before. A Jewish person told a friend of mine, our son died in a car crash because we stopped going to synagogue. That's superstition. Now, I'm going to bring it to an end because we're running out of time. I love that song by the Beatles, Living is Easy with Eyes Closed. It must say it's much more sometimes secure not to have to think outside of your box or go out of your comfort zone and question why. But I personally believe the greater we can extend the circle of our consciousness, the more fully we'll live. The greater we can extend the circle of our consciousness to include more people, more things, nature, the more fully we'll live. Don't let fear or hate or bitterness or resentment or self-pity keep you in your cave. Wonder invites us out of our caves. Wonder invites us out of the cave. Goethe said, the ideal mode of thought is that which allows the eternal to be seen in the transitory. And I love this quote from William Blake. If the doors of perception were cleansed, everything would appear to man, and I'll add woman, as it is, infinite. For man and woman has closed himself, herself up till they see all things through narrow chinks of their cavern. Gilbert Murray once said, mythology never happened because it's always happening. Mythology never happened because it's always happening. We are always invited to come out of our caves and come out into the light and see and know and learn. And to me, the amazing thing is that it's not an invention, it's a discovery. And I believe that there's so much in our minds that we have yet to explore and discover greater things. Thank you all for listening. Now we're going to hear from Becky and Rob. And think about this coming out of the cave. You can see clearly now.
I can see clearly now, the rain is gone. I can see all obstacles in my way. Gone are the dark clouds that had me blind. It's gonna be a bright, 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 sunshiny day. It's gonna be a bright, bright, sunshiny day. I think I can make it now, the pain is gone. All of the bad feelings have disappeared. Here is the rainbow I've been praying for. It's gonna be a bright, bright, sunshiny day. It's gonna be a bright, bright, sunshiny day. Look all around, there's nothing but blue skies. Look straight ahead, nothing but blue skies. I can see clearly now, the rain is gone. I can see all the obstacles in my way. Gone are the dark clouds that had me blind. It's gonna be a bright, bright, sunshiny day. It's gonna be a bright, bright, sunshiny day.
Thank you, Becky and Rob. Before we close, does anyone have any questions, comments, or opposing viewpoints they want to share?